everybody, this is Jean here, Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for You. I'm looking at myself in my camera. I look like the Oompa Loompa, the Michelin man with my big coat. I was enjoying the outside here and I just decided to share with you a quilt that I had made ages ago. One of my last videos, Jen came showing her giraffe quilt, and if you are new to this channel, we're in temporary accommodation here. Quite a few of you who have watched me know our situation. We were sort of survivors of the tornadoes that hit in our area here in Pennsylvania, not the ones in Kentucky, which was utter devastation. However, the remnants of Hurricane Ida, which spurned tornadoes and flash flooding and the winds in the Fort Washington, Dresher, Horsham area of Upper Dublin, Pennsylvania, where we live, has rendered our house uninhabitable. The water came up and pretty much ruined quite a bit of our property. We are now in temporary accommodation. When we went back after the floodwaters had receded, we were rescued by our son in his large truck on the evening time, at the nighttime that the tornado hit. We came back the next day to assess the damage, and the things that were in our basement were ruined, but there were a few items in my sewing room and in our living room that our friend Jen, my friend Jen, had taken. We quickly had put our sewing machines up, the computers on the night of the tornado, and then we left. But the next day Jen came and she took a couple of my sewing machines to safety because we are now in an apartment, the basement apartment at our son's home. She had rescued a couple of quilts that I had had over chairs, over beds, over stacked in the corner, and this was one of them. This was just one of the quilts that I had made years and years ago. I had been selling my quilts quite successfully up until about a year ago on Etsy. Then Etsy changed, I must say. I really was successful selling my quilts, Truelove Quilts for You, on Etsy. But then they changed their policies, and it just became a minefield that I didn't want to undertake. And I had sold my quilts, and then of course I had started my YouTube venture here, and my priorities were shifted. So I'm not sewing. I'm obviously not sewing as much now in the temporary accommodation I am in. But I thought, as you've been watching me, my loyal subscribers have been watching me. My channel has changed, but I thought I would share this one quilt with you that Jen rescued for me. As you can see, the reason I'm showing you this is if you are interested in tutorials, which you probably come to the quilting channels or are recommended to watch a quilting tutorial, I wanted to show you this quilt as an example. Again, I made this quilt years ago, but I do have I'm going to put down in the links below the tutorials, not on this actual quilt, but the method that I used for this applique. As you can see, I had used Asian fabrics, Asian inspired fabrics. They're really beautiful images that I isolated for these circles. I tried to use light on dark and dark on light. Now there's not like a white or a black in this quilt, but there are lighter images on a darker background, a darker image on a lighter background. And that's how I think the eye is appealing. It roams around the quilt. Again, I isolated the different images here, and I appliqued with a satin stitch, just a very fine satin stitch. I appliqued my image on. I had used a little bit of glue stick. As you know, I like Elmer's glue stick. You can use a fusible web. You can use a needle turn applique, fine needle turn. But I used it was raw, but then I finished the edges with a satin stitch. for my appliquing my circles onto my my background fabric here. One of my very first videos I had is I have a certain table that I came with my, was it my Husqvarna sewing machine years and years, 15, 16 years ago, where it's sort of like the protractor, you put a compass, a protractor in and you go around. I had done these circles that way, but also I'm going to link another video of just actually putting my circles on freehand, gluing them on and then stitching on my circles. The other thing I wanted to share is my actual quilting. I'll take some close-up shots. My actual quilting here, I had used a stencil, and again, one of my first videos is showing how to do free motion quilting, but using a stencil, how to mark my feather quilting. Again, that's not a beginner skill, but as you know, I'm always saying learn free motion quilting, but sometimes when you're free motion quilting, you don't have a clue what to quilt. So I'm going to, again, link the video showing how it's not this quilt again, but the method of me using a stencil and some chalk, how I marked my feather stencil here, and I used a metallic thread around my for my quilt here. Again, I find that the chalk that I'm referring to works very beautifully on darker fabric. Obviously this was the metallic thread on black fabric. I have successfully, to a certain extent, used the chalk on white fabrics or cream. It's very difficult to see. They do come, the one I'm talking about is the pounce powder, the chalk, comes in blue and pink. I didn't have a lot of success removing those markings. A lot of people say, how do you mark a quilt to actually, if you want to do a decorative stencil, if you want to do a decorative pattern on your quilt, how do you mark a quilt? There are tons of ways. Pencil, a lot of people use a washable Crayola markers. There's success with that. That's a whole nother subject on how to mark a quilt. A lot of people use a tailor's chalk. I quite like the chalk method because that can rub off. Anyway, Jen had bought this quilt over yesterday, 2 days ago, a couple days ago, and she had, as I said, she had rescued from the mess of our home. We had just grabbed a couple quilts. I might have had even a dozen quilts that Jen had from the tornado ravaged house, but up in her loft when we moved almost 2 years ago, when we moved from our family home of almost 30 years, Jen had taken quite a lot of my inventory that I had left over from my Etsy shop. I completely forgot about that, and again in the melee of the disaster that we've been dealing with, Jen said, do you remember that you have all of these quilts up in my attic space in vacuum packed bags, safely sealed? They're if I just open them up, my lovely quilts. And I remember we had done a video, maybe 6-8 months ago, I'm not quite sure, again, you must forgive me. If we get them out, I'm not selling them on my Etsy shop or in my Etsy shop. I might be, now that the smoke is clearing a little bit, the fog of the disaster, I might just have Jen over and we might just do a sale, just to not to get rid of them, but to let somebody else enjoy them at a discounted price. So that may be coming. I'm going to talk to Jen about that. We had discussed that before because they're just languishing safely and cleanly up in her attic. And I thought, well, maybe some people would enjoy that. But this is one of my earlier ones, one of my favorites. I also have one I have shared many years ago on this channel. I had made an Asian looking quilt with a panel with a geisha girl. I'll take a picture of that and I'll show you. That was my husband. He asked me to make that quilt for him. And she just bought them over. I haven't seen these now in months and months. We had all of my quilts sort of everywhere in our home, the ones that I didn't sell. And as the disaster unfolded and we had to rescue things and save things, this was one of them that Jen bought. And I'm so thrilled about it. I hadn't seen it for a while, and I thought, so I'm going to just link the few tutorials that I had done. If you're interested in just a simple, again, beginner, you don't have to have this special table, or you can just cut out, and I'll show you how I actually sat and stitch my circles onto a background fabric. So it's a lovely way to use scraps up. That's only a 6 or 7 inch piece of fabric here, and then perhaps even a 10-inch square if you have. And again, I think a lot of the appeal is, again, the light on the dark, what you perceive as light on dark, what you perceive as dark on light. Makes a real visual treat. Very simple. I then just used a sashing. I like an inch sashing, start out at 1.5 inches, and then a nice wide border for my lovely feather quilting here. I must say, I'm looking at this and I had used the metallic thread. I'm not quite sure which machine. I think it might have been my Husqvarna, because I've had a Husqvarna, I've had a large brother, and I've had Juki since. I think it was my Husqvarna that actually didn't mind the metallic thread. A lot of people have had difficulty, which I have had in the past, using a metallic thread. It shreds, it unwinds, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, it actually turned out quite nice, my metallic stitching, my metallic thread. And again, that's a whole different animal if you want to look that up. I think a larger needle, so you know, when you're using a metallic thread, because I'm sure a lot of you have had that issue. But I managed to do that quite successfully. I'm quite pleased. And again, I'll put those videos up of how I actually transferred from my stencils, my pattern, my feather quilting pattern, onto the black there, and stitched it out. Then you just rub off the chalk. This is the back of this quilt, which is a beautiful Asian, and what I see as an Asian print. Large, lovely lovely fabric on the back. I always use quilting cottons on the back. I don't use a muslin or a sheet, although by all means you can, but I sort of make my quilts, you know, double-sided. So that's that. And I had learned even at that early stage, I'm looking at this, to free motion quilt. I had actually just done a tiny bit of free motion quilting. There's just one circle in there, and then one circle around the actual circle there. Not a lot of quilting. And then of course just in the ditch there. So this was a very simple quilt that I had made, but I think again, very effective, and I thought I'd share it with you. All right, folks, thank you so much for being patient with us. Our situation is evolving day by day. I will give you an update one of these days on what could be happening or may not be happening. Yeah, I appreciate all of your support and all of your kindness and all of your patience with me and our family here in this situation we find ourselves in. We're very blessed, and we're trying to keep positive. All right, folks, again, have a lovely day. Love from the Trueloves. Bye.